am Della, 28 years old, standing in the plush waiting room of an upscale law firm. My eyes are still swollen from crying at Uncle Walter's funeral yesterday. He was the man who saved me when my parents abandoned me 15 years ago. The elegant mahogany door swings open, and my heart stops. There they are, Frank and Elaine, my parents. 15 years of silence, and now they appear draped in cheap knockoff jewelry, exchanging smirks about the millions they expect to inherit. If you are watching this right now, let me know if you have ever had family members suddenly reappear when money was involved. Like and subscribe to hear how my uncle's brilliant plan exposed their true colors and left them completely shattered. My childhood in Pittsburgh was far from idyllic. We lived in a rundown apartment in a neighborhood where sirens were our nightly lullaby. The building had peeling paint, broken elevators, and the constant smell of mold. Our one-bedroom apartment housed 4 people, with Tommy and I sharing a pull-out couch in the living room. Most nights, one or both of our parents were absent, leaving me to care for my little brother, Frank. My father worked sporadically as a construction worker, but his real passion was sports betting. Every payday followed the same pattern. He would cash his check at the corner store, stop at the bookies, and disappear for hours. Sometimes he would return jubilant, taking us out for ice cream and promising a better future. More often, he would stumble home drunk, reeking of cheap whiskey, his mood volatile as a summer storm. One minute, he would be crying, telling us how much he loved us. The next, he would be throwing plates against the wall because dinner was cold. "You are just like your uncle, always judging me." He would snap at me when I asked where the rent money had gone. I learned early to read his moods, to know when to speak and when to make myself invisible. Elaine. My mother worked at a department store makeup counter. She was beautiful in a brittle way, with carefully applied makeup and clothes she could not afford. She spent her paychecks on designer knockoffs and costume jewelry, dreaming of the luxury life she deserved in her mind. Her children were the anchors that had dragged her down from the glamorous life she might have had. "I could have been a model," she would say, looking at old photographs. "I could have been somebody before I got stuck with you, too." Tommy was 3 years younger than me, a gentle soul with asthma and a talent for drawing. He had Dad's dark curls but Mom's delicate features. From the moment he was born, I appointed myself his protector. I made sure he took his medicine, helped him with homework, and diverted our parents' anger when it threatened to engulf him. Food was often scarce in our home. I became an expert at stretching a jar of peanut butter for days, cutting each sandwich into 4 triangles to make it seem more substantial. I learned which neighbors might offer a meal if I mentioned casually that our stove was broken, and which school clubs provided snacks at their meetings. At school, I maintained perfect grades. Education was my ticket out. I understood that intuitively. My teachers noticed my potential and my circumstances. Mrs. Winters, my 4th grade teacher, often saved an extra carton of milk for me and sometimes slipped granola bars into my backpack when no one was looking. "You are a bright girl," she would say. "Do not let anything dim your light." My best friend Lucy lived 3 blocks away in a stable, middle-class home with parents who worked regular hours and a refrigerator that was always full. Her home became my sanctuary, the place I escaped to when my parents' fighting became unbearable. Lucy's mom never asked questions when I showed up at dinner time. Just set an extra place at the table. One memory stands out from my 8th birthday. Neither of my parents remembered the date I went to school, trying not to care, telling myself I was too old for birthday parties anyway. That evening, I found a small package wrapped in newspaper comics on my pillow. Tommy had saved his lunch money for weeks to buy me a plastic bracelet with purple beads. He had made a card from scraps of construction paper rescued from the school trash can. That night, I cried myself to sleep, not from sadness, but from the pure, sharp love I felt for my brother. I was 10 when I first met Uncle Walter. He arrived in a sleek black car that looked alien on our street. At 35, he was only 7 years older than my father, but seemed to belong to a different species altogether. Walter was tall and confident, wearing a tailored suit and a genuine smile. He was my father's older brother, but the resemblance ended at their shared dark eyes. Walter brought gifts for Tommy, a remote control car that made his eyes widen with delight. For me, a book about women inventors that showed he had somehow seen into my soul and understood me in a way my parents never had. "You remind me of our grandmother," he told me quietly. She had the same curious mind. The tension between Walter and Frank was palpable. They spoke in clipped sentences, years of resentment compressed into every syllable. Not all of us had college handed to us on a silver platter, Frank spat, when Walter mentioned his company's success. And not all of us blame everyone else for our problems, Walter replied evenly. After that visit, Walter tried to maintain contact. He called on holidays and our birthdays. He offered to pay for private school for Tommy's medical treatment for a bigger apartment. Frank refused every offer, his pride stronger than his concern for his children's welfare. "We do not need his charity," he would say. "He just wants to show off how much better he is than me." As I entered my teens, our family situation deteriorated rapidly. Eviction notices appeared on our door. The electricity was shut off for days at a time. The refrigerator contained nothing but condiment packets from fast food restaurants. Tommy's asthma worsened, but we could not afford his inhaler. I resorted to asking my science teacher for a loan, making up a story about lost wallets and emergency situations. One night, I overheard my parents talking in hushed voices in the kitchen. "We cannot keep going like this," my mother hissed. "The landlord is not giving us another extension." "I know a guy who knows a guy," my father replied. "He says this is our best option." "What about Walter?" my mother asked. "I would rather die than ask him for help." My father said, "Besides, this is temporary, just until I land on my feet again." I did not understand then what they were planning. I wish I had the day that changed. Everything started deceptively normal. It was a Thursday in October, crisp and bright with autumn colors. I had just turned 13 the week before. With no acknowledgement from my parents beyond a mumbled happy birthday from my mother, that morning Frank announced that we were going on a weekend trip to visit an old friend. This was unusual enough to make me suspicious. We never went anywhere, never had money for vacations or outings. "Pack enough for a couple of days," Elaine instructed, handing me a duffel bag. "And help your brother pack too." There were warning signs. I should have noticed the way Elaine hugged me too tightly before we left, her expensive perfume overwhelming the way Frank avoided meeting my eyes staring out the bus window as Pittsburgh receded behind us. The fact that they brought only one small suitcase for themselves, while insisting Tommy and I packed several changes of clothes after a 3-hour bus ride. We arrived in Millbrook, a small town I had never heard of. Frank led us to a modest house on a quiet street where a gray-haired woman waited on the porch. "Kids, this is Margaret." Frank said she is an old friend who has kindly offered to let us stay for the weekend. Margaret smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. She was a stranger to me. Though my parents acted as if they had known her forever, her house was tidy but sparse with plastic covers on the furniture and walls devoid of personal photos. That first evening, after a silent dinner of spaghetti and canned sauce, my parents announced they needed to run to the store for groceries. "We will be back soon," Elaine said, applying fresh lipstick in the hallway mirror. "Be good for Margaret." Tommy sat by the window for hours, his small face pressed against the glass, watching for headlights that never appeared. As bedtime approached, he grew anxious. "Where are Mom and Dad?" he asked, his breathing becoming labored the way it did before an asthma attack. "They probably got held up." I reassured him, though my own stomach was knotted with worry. "They will be back by morning." Margaret set up a rollaway bed in a small back room for us to share. I lay awake most of the night, listening to Tommy's wheezing breaths and the unfamiliar creaks of the strange house. By morning, there was still no sign of our parents. I tried calling their cell phones, but a robotic voice informed me that both numbers were no longer in service. Margaret avoided my questions, busying herself with breakfast preparations and laundry. By the second day, Tommy developed a high fever, his asthma flaring without his medication. Margaret finally called a local doctor who brought an emergency inhaler. As the doctor examined my brother, I confronted Margaret in the kitchen. "Where are my parents?" I demanded. "When are they coming back?" Margaret's shoulders slumped. She looked suddenly older, the lines around her mouth deepening. "I was not going to tell you yet," she said softly. "Your parents paid me to keep you for a week. They said they would come back, but she pulled an envelope from a drawer and handed it to me. Inside was a single sheet of paper with my mother's flowing handwriting. "Stella and Tommy, we cannot continue like this. You deserve better than what we can provide. Do not try to find us. This is for the best. You will have a better life without us dragging you down." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. No, I love you. No real explanation. Just abandonment, disguised as sacrifice. Margaret called the police that afternoon. They arrived with grim faces and clipboards asking questions I could barely process. Child Protective Services was contacted. Tommy and I were taken to separate rooms and interviewed. They wanted to know if our parents had ever hurt us physically. No. If they had mentioned where they might go. No. If we had other relatives who could take us in. My uncle, I said through tears. Uncle Walter in Chicago. The worst moment came the next day when they told us they were placing us in separate foster homes. Tommy clung to me, his small body racked with sobs. You cannot take him, I begged. He needs me. He has asthma. He is afraid of the dark. But my pleas fell on deaf ears. Tommy was placed with a family in Ohio, while I was sent to a group home in Millbrook until more permanent arrangements could be made. The last glimpse I had of my brother was his pale face in the back window of a social worker's car, his hand pressed against the glass in farewell. That night in the group home, surrounded by strangers in bunk beds, I felt a coldness settle into my bones. I had lost everything. My parents had abandoned us. I was separated from Tommy. I was completely alone. 2 weeks passed in the group home. I existed in a fog, barely eating, refusing to speak to the counselors or the other girls. I spent my days curled on my assigned bed, clutching the book about women inventors. Walter had given me years ago the only possession I had managed to bring from home. The social worker assigned to my case, Miss Reynolds, visited daily, trying to coax me into conversation. Her patience was finally rewarded when she mentioned she had been trying to locate my uncle Walter Campbell. I sat up for the first time in days. Did you find him? We did, she said, smiling gently. He is flying in tomorrow to meet with us the next day. I waited nervously in the director's office, picking at a loose thread on my borrowed sweatshirt. When Walter walked in, I barely recognized him. His normally immaculate appearance was disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. When he saw me, his professional facade crumbled entirely. Stella, he whispered, kneeling before me. I am so sorry. I had no idea. For the first time since being abandoned, I allowed myself to cry. Walter held me awkwardly at first, then more confidently as his protective instincts took over. The meeting that followed was tense. Walter's anger at my father was palpable, his voice shaking as he spoke to Miss Reynolds. Frank did this. My own brother abandoned his children. He ran a hand through his hair. I knew things were bad, but I never imagined. Where is Tommy? I want to see him. 2. Miss Reynolds explained that Tommy had already been placed with a foster family in another state. Walter's expression hardened. That is unacceptable. They need to be together. I am their uncle, their only living relative, aside from their parents. I will take them both. What followed was a crash course in the complexities of the child welfare system. Despite Walter's resources and determination, reuniting us would not be simple. The foster family that had taken Tommy was considering adoption. State lines complicated matters. Walter would need to prove he was a suitable guardian for not one but 2 traumatized children. I do not care what it takes. Walter told his lawyer on the phone that evening, hire the best family court attorneys in the country. I want both kids with me by Christmas. In the meantime, Walter rented an apartment near the group home so he could visit me daily, while the guardianship paperwork was processed. 3 weeks later, I was released into his temporary custody, and we flew to his home in Chicago. Walter's house, or mansion, as it seemed to me, was in an upscale neighborhood with manicured lawns and wrought iron gates. My bedroom was larger than our entire apartment in Pittsburgh, with a canopy bed and a walk-in closet already filled with new clothes in my size. Is this all for me? I asked, unable to comprehend such luxury. Of course, Walter said, looking uncomfortable. The decorator helped pick things out. If you do not like anything, we can change it. That first night, I could not sleep. The bed was too soft, the room too quiet without Tommy's breathing beside me. I crept downstairs at midnight to find Walter in his office, surrounded by legal papers, talking intensely on the phone about custody arrangements. Walter was not a natural with children. He had never married, had no kids of his own, and spent most of his time running his tech company. He spoke to me formally at first, as if I were a miniature adult or a business associate, but his genuine desire to help shone through his awkwardness. The house staff helped ease the transition. Flora, the housekeeper, was a warm, grandmotherly woman who snuck me cookies and taught me to bake bread on weekends. Mr. Jenkins, the chauffeur, had a dry sense of humor that occasionally broke through my shell of silence. School was another challenge. Walter enrolled me in an exclusive private academy where my classmates had grown up with privilege I could barely comprehend. They wore designer clothes without a thought, planned vacations to Europe, and complained about strict parents who limited their screen time. I was the odd one out with my second-hand past and missing family. "Why do you live with your uncle?" one girl asked during lunch. "Did your parents die? They left," I said simply, watching her eyes widen with incomprehension. She could not imagine parents who would choose to leave. The nightmares started my third week in Chicago. I would wake up screaming for Tommy, convinced he was having an asthma attack and needed me. Walter would rush in, panicked and helpless in the face of my grief. After the fifth night, he arranged for me to see Dr. Bennett, a child psychologist specializing in trauma and abandonment. The kind-faced woman with salt and pepper hair became my lifeline over the following months. "What your parents did says everything about them and nothing about you," she told me during our sessions. "You did not cause this. You could not have prevented it." Walter attended parenting classes and read books on raising teenagers. He hired tutors to help me catch up academically and made sure I had everything I needed materially. But the breakthrough in our relationship came unexpectedly on the night of my 14th birthday. Walter had arranged a small party with a few girls from school I had become friendly with. After they left, he presented me with a small wrapped package. "It is not much," he said awkwardly, "but I thought you might like it." Inside was a silver locket. When I opened it, I found a small photograph of Tommy and me taken years ago at a rare family picnic when we were still a family of 4. "How did you get this?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I asked your old neighbors if they had any photos," Walter admitted. "Mrs. Winters, your former teacher had this one from a school event. I thought you would want to keep him close until we get him back." That was when the dam broke. I sobbed in Walter's arms, releasing months of pent-up fear and grief. He held me awkwardly at first, then with more confidence. "I'm not trying to replace your parents, Stella," he said quietly. "I know I cannot, but I promise you I will never leave you, and I will not stop until Tommy is here too." That night, Walter shared stories about his and Frank's childhood, how their father had been harsh and critical, especially toward Frank, who struggled in school. How their mother had made Walter promise to look out for his younger brother before she died of cancer. How he had tried to help Frank over the years, only to be rebuffed. "Time and again I failed him," Walter admitted. "And by extension, I failed. You and Tommy. I should have done more. Pushed harder. You are helping now," I said. "That is what matters." 6 months after I moved to Chicago, we received news from the private investigator Walter had hired. Tommy had been located with his foster family in Columbus, Ohio. They were reluctant to give him up, having already formed attachments, but Walter was determined. Our first visit was supervised by social workers. Tommy had grown taller in our months apart, but was still painfully thin. His eyes too large for his face when he saw me. He launched himself into my arms with a cry. "Stella, you came! I knew you would find me." I held him so tightly, he squeaked in protest, cataloging changes in my little brother. His asthma was better managed now. His foster parents ensuring he had proper medication. He was enrolled in art classes, his natural talent flourishing with proper supplies and instruction. Part of me was grateful they had taken good care of him, even as I resented them for having the time with him that I had lost. Walter knelt to Tommy's level, introducing himself gently. "I have heard so much about you," he said. "Della talks about you all the time." Tommy studied Walter carefully before asking, "Are you going to be our new dad?" Walter glanced at me, then back to Tommy. "I would like to be your guardian if that is okay with you. We can figure out what you want to call me later." As we left that first visit, Tommy clung to my hand. "Do not leave me again," he begged. "Never, I promised. Walter is going to bring you home with us soon." Walter was true to his word. He did not give up, despite the legal obstacles. He hired the best family law attorneys, attended every court hearing, and proved his commitment to both of us. For 2 years, Walter fought through the legal system to reunite Tommy and me. The custody battle was complicated by state boundaries, the foster family's attachment to Tommy, and concerns about Walter's demanding career and bachelor lifestyle. But Walter's determination never wavered. He restructured his company to allow him more time at home, renovated a bedroom specifically for Tommy, and even installed a state-of-the-art air purification system to help with Tommy's asthma. The day Tommy finally came home to Chicago permanently was the happiest day of my life, since our parents had left. He was 12 by then, still small for his age, but healthier. His creative spirit intact, despite everything he had endured. Walter arranged a welcome home party with balloons and Tommy's favorite chocolate cake for the first time. The mansion felt like a home. Walter's approach to parenting was unique. Having never had children, he treated us more like young adults than kids. Explaining his decisions and listening to our opinions, he spoke to us about his business, Campbell Tech Solutions, a cybersecurity firm he had built from scratch. The company protects other businesses from hackers and data breaches. He explained one evening at dinner, "Think of it as a digital security system." I found myself fascinated by the business world Walter inhabited. Numbers had always made sense to me, patterns and projections coming naturally to my analytical mind. When Walter noticed my interest, he began bringing home simplified versions of business problems for us to discuss. "What would you do in this situation?" he would ask, outlining a client's dilemma or a marketing challenge. Tommy, meanwhile, flourished in his new arts-focused middle school. Walter had converted a sunroom into an art studio for him, complete with professional quality supplies and north-facing windows for optimal light. Tommy's asthma improved dramatically with proper medical care and less stress, his attacks becoming rare occurrences rather than weekly events. Gradually, the three of us formed our own family traditions. Sunday dinners were sacred. No business calls or homework allowed. We took summer trips to national parks, Walter patiently hiking at our pace despite his fitness advantage. For Christmas, we volunteered at a local shelter before exchanging our own gifts, Walter insisting that giving back was part of the privilege we now enjoyed. On my 16th birthday, Walter presented me with legal papers. He wanted to formally adopt both Tommy and me, giving us his last name. "You do not have to decide right away," he said, "and you can keep your original name if you prefer. This changes nothing about how I feel about you both." Tommy immediately said yes, thrilled at the idea of officially becoming a Campbell. I hesitated, torn between my anger at my birth parents and a lingering sense of loyalty to my original identity. In the end, we compromised with hyphenation. We became the Maurice Campbell siblings, honoring our past while embracing our future. The adoption was finalized on a snowy December morning, the three of us dressed in our best clothes for the courthouse ceremony. The judge, who had overseen much of our case, smiled as she signed the final papers. "This is how the system is supposed to work," she told Walter. "You have given these children the stability they deserve." High school flew by in a blur of advanced classes, debate team competitions, and growing confidence. Walter never pressured me about college, but I knew education was important to him. When acceptance letters arrived from several prestigious universities, I chose Northwestern's business program, allowing me to live at home while attending classes. Tommy continued to develop his artistic talents, his paintings winning regional competitions, and eventually earning him a spot at a selective arts high school. His gentle nature remained intact despite everything he had endured, a testament to his resilience. Walter made good on his promise to teach us about business, but not in the way I expected. The summer after my freshman year of college, he arranged an entry-level position for me at Campbell Tech. "No special treatment," he warned. "You start in the mailroom like I did at my first job. If you want to advance, you earn it." I worked my way through nearly every department over the next few summers and school breaks. Customer service taught me patience. Accounting refined my natural affinity for numbers. Marketing challenged my creative thinking. By my senior year, I had a comprehensive understanding of how the entire company functioned. My first real contribution came when I identified a market opportunity. Walter had overlooked small businesses needed cybersecurity too, but could not afford the enterprise-level solutions Campbell Tech specialized in. I developed a scaled-down subscription-based service that opened an entirely new revenue stream. "This is brilliant," Walter said, reviewing my proposal. "I want you to present this to the board yourself." At 22, fresh out of college, I stood before the company's board of directors and pitched my idea. They approved it unanimously, impressed not just with the concept, but with my thorough market analysis and implementation plan. 6 months later, when the new division showed strong initial profits, Walter named me Vice President of Small Business Solutions. "You earned this," he said, handing me a business card with my new title. "This has nothing to do with our relationship and everything to do with your abilities." Tommy, now 19, and studying at the Art Institute of Chicago, designed the logo for the new division. His talent had evolved from simple drawings to sophisticated digital art and traditional painting. He had found his voice through color and form, expressing the complex emotions of our childhood through abstract canvases that somehow conveyed both pain and hope. Just as everything seemed perfect, disaster struck. Walter, always healthy and energetic at 50, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The prognosis was grim from the start late stage, with limited treatment options. 6 months to a year, the oncologist told us privately, "We can try to make him comfortable, but this type is particularly aggressive." Walter approached his illness with the same methodical determination he brought to business. He updated his will, organized his affairs, and began transitioning leadership responsibilities to his executive team and to me. He refused to let cancer define his remaining time scheduling treatments around important meetings and Tommy's art shows. "I have no regrets," he told me one evening as we sat on the terrace watching the sunset over Lake Michigan. "Finding you and Tommy gave my life meaning beyond business success. Those final 2 years were a balancing act of heartbreak and grace. I split my time between running the small business division and accompanying Walter to treatments. Tommy moved back home from his campus apartment to be closer to us, converting part of his studio into a comfortable space where Walter could rest while watching him paint. Walter exceeded the doctor's initial timeline through sheer force of will, holding on long enough to see Tommy graduate with honors and to witness my promotion to executive vice president. But eventually, even his determination could not overcome the disease ravaging his body. In his final week, Walter called me to his bedside and handed me his grandfather's pocket watch, a family heirloom I had often admired. "You are the future of the Campbell name now," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You and Tommy. I could not be prouder of the people you have become." The morning Walter passed away, the sky outside his window was the exact blue of a perfect summer day. Tommy and I were both with him, one on each side of his bed, holding his hands as he took his final breath. There was sadness, of course, overwhelming at times, but also a deep gratitude for the 15 years he had given us, years that had transformed us from abandoned children into confident, capable adults. "He saved us," Tommy said simply. At the funeral, not just physically, but in every way that matters. Walter's funeral was held at the largest cathedral in Chicago, a testament to his impact on the business community and his extensive philanthropic work. Hundreds attended, from corporate executives to the janitors from company headquarters, whom Walter had always greeted by name. The mayor gave a speech about Walter's contributions to the city's technology sector. Business competitors came to pay their respects alongside longtime employees who wept openly for the loss of a boss who had treated them like family. Tommy, now a poised young man of 21, flew in from New York, where he had recently accepted a position with a prestigious gallery. He performed a piano piece he had composed for Walter, the haunting melody capturing both our grief and our gratitude. I delivered the eulogy, somehow finding strength to stand before the crowd and speak about the man who had transformed our lives. Walter Campbell was known to most of you as a brilliant businessman, a visionary leader, a generous philanthropist. I began to my brother and me. He was simply the person who loved us when we had been deemed unlovable. He taught us that family is not defined by blood, but by choice, by showing up day after day with unwavering support. As I concluded my speech and returned to my seat in the front row, I noticed movement at the back of the cathedral. 2 figures had slipped in during the service, standing awkwardly by the last pew, even from a distance. Even after 15 years, I recognized them immediately. Frank and Dylan Morris, my parents. My hands began to shake so badly that Tommy noticed. Following my gaze to the back of the church is that he whispered, his face draining of color. I nodded, unable to speak. They looked older, of course. Frank's dark hair was now streaked with gray. His once powerful frame softened by age and likely alcohol. Elaine still maintained her carefully curated appearance, though her attempt at elegance now seemed desperate rather than sophisticated. After the service, as mourners gathered in the reception hall, they approached us. Elaine reached for me, arms extended for an embrace. I had no intention of returning. "Della, sweetheart," she said, her voice thick with manufactured emotion. "How we have missed you." I stepped back, Tommy moving protectively to my side. "Do not touch me," I said quietly. Frank cleared his throat. "We came as soon as we heard about Walter. Blood is thicker than water after all. We are still family." "Family?" Tommy's voice cracked with disbelief. "You abandoned us. You left us with a stranger. You never called, never wrote, never checked if we were alive or dead." Elaine's eyes filled with practiced tears. "You do not understand, sweetie. We were going through such difficult times. We did what we thought was best for you." "We need to talk privately," Frank said, glancing around at the curious onlookers. "There is so much to explain, so much you do not know." Before I could respond, a tall, distinguished man with silver hair approached our group. Gordon Chen, Walter's longtime attorney and friend, placed himself slightly between us and our biological parents. "Miss Morris Campbell." "Mr. Morris Campbell," he said formally. "I do not believe these people were invited to the service." Elaine flashed what she clearly thought was a charming smile. "We are Frank and Elaine Morris, Stella and Tommy's parents. We are family. I am well aware of who you are," Gordon replied, his tone glacial. "Walter spoke of you often, though never in flattering terms." Frank puffed up his chest. "Listen here. We have every right to be with our children during this difficult time." Gordon's expression did not change. "Actually, you forfeited those rights 15 years ago. However, as it happens, your presence will be required on Friday morning at 10:00 at my office for the reading of Walter's will." Elaine's demeanor shifted instantly, her grief replaced by poorly concealed interest. "Walter included us in his will. That is a matter to be disclosed at the appropriate time," Gordon said. "Now, if you will excuse us, the family needs privacy to grieve," as Gordon led us away. I noticed something I had missed initially. The designer clothing Frank and Elaine wore was new but cheaply made. The gold watch on Frank's wrist was a knockoff Rolex. The diamonds in Elaine's ears were cubic zirconia. They were still playing the same old game, presenting an illusion of success that had no substance behind it. Later that evening, back at the house that now felt too empty without Walter, Tommy expressed his concerns. Why would Walter include them in his will? And why would they show up now, after all this time? "They obviously heard about Walter's money," I said bitterly. "They always did have a talent for sniffing out potential paydays." Gordon, who had joined us for a quiet dinner, nodded. "I believe you are correct, Della. However, I would ask that you both attend the reading on Friday." Walter was very specific about who needed to be present. Tommy frowned. "I do not want them there. They do not deserve anything from Walter." "I understand," Gordon said gently, "but I believe you will want to witness this particular reading." Walter had his reasons for the arrangements he made that night. I could not sleep. I wandered through the quiet house, eventually finding myself in Walter's study. Everything remained exactly as he had left it. His reading glasses, still perched on top of a financial report, his favorite pen resting in its holder. I sat in his leather chair, inhaling the lingering scent of his cologne. "What were you planning?" "Walter?" I whispered to the empty room. "What final lesson do you have for us?" Friday morning dawned bright and clear. A beautiful September day that seemed at odds with the tension coiling in my stomach. Tommy and I arrived at Gordon's law firm 15 minutes early, dressed formally in respect for the occasion. The office, located in a historic building in downtown Chicago, exuded old-world wealth, with its oak paneling, Persian rugs, and oil paintings of stern-faced founders. Gordon greeted us in the lobby, his usual composed demeanor offering a steady anchor in the emotional storm I felt brewing. "They have not arrived yet," he informed us. "We will be using the main conference room. Can I offer either of you coffee or water while we wait?" We both declined. too nervous to consume anything at precisely 10 hooters. The elevator doors opened, and Frank and Elaine stepped out. They had clearly made an effort with their appearance, wearing what looked like newly purchased clothing. Elaine's hair was freshly colored and styled her makeup expertly applied. Frank had attempted to tame his thinning hair with too much product, and the scent of his aftershave reached us before he did. "Good morning," Elaine trilled, as if we were gathering for a pleasant social occasion, rather than the distribution of assets from the man who had raised her abandoned children. Gordon led us all to the conference room, where several others already waited. Flora, who had been Walter's housekeeper for 20 years, Martin Weber, the chief financial officer of Campbell Tech, and Jessica Lee, young Walter's executive assistant. "Now that everyone is present, we can begin," Gordon said, taking his place at the head of the polished mahogany table. He opened a thick leather portfolio and adjusted his reading glasses. "This is the last will and testament of Walter Edward Campbell revised and signed 6 months ago with all sound mental faculties and in the presence of 3 witnesses." Frank shifted impatiently in his seat. "Can we skip to the important parts? We all know Walter was loaded." Gordon regarded him coldly. "Mr. Morris, this proceeding will follow proper legal protocol if that is inconvenient for you. You are welcome to wait outside until your specific portion is addressed." Frank subsided, but I caught the quick glance he exchanged with Elaine, a look of barely suppressed excitement. Gordon began with the standard legal preamble before moving to the specific bequests. Walter had been generous with his charitable giving, establishing substantial endowments for education, medical research, and arts organizations. He left significant funds to his alma mater for a scholarship program specifically designed for children in foster care. Flora wiped tears from her eyes when Gordon announced that Walter had left her the lakeside cottage she had always admired, along with a retirement fund that would ensure her comfort for the rest of her life. Longtime employees received generous financial gifts, including Jessica and Martin. As Gordon continued reading, I noticed Frank becoming increasingly agitated, checking his watch and whispering to Elaine. They had clearly come for one thing only, and their impatience was palpable. "And now," Gordon said, looking up from the document, "we come to the matter of Frank and Elaine Morris." Frank sat up straighter, nudging Elaine, who quickly arranged her features into an expression of somber attention to my brother, Frank Morris, and his wife, Elaine Morris. Gordon read, "I leave the sum of $1 each, along with the enclosed letter, which is to be read aloud at this time." $1. Frank exploded, his face flushing dark red. "This is a joke, right? Some sick final prank." "Please contain yourself, Mr. Morris," Gordon said firmly as instructed. "I will now read Walter's letter, addressed to you both." He opened a sealed envelope and unfolded several pages of Walter's distinctive handwriting. Frank and Elaine, Gordon read, "If this letter is being read to you, it means you have done exactly what I predicted you would do. You have reappeared after 15 years of absence, drawn by the scent of money like vultures to carrion." Elaine gasped dramatically, placing her hand over her heart. "What you may not know," Gordon continued reading, "is that I am fully aware of your actions both before and after you abandoned your children 15 years ago, exactly 3 days after leaving Della and Tommy with a stranger. You contacted me, demanding $50,000 in exchange for your silence about what you termed your part in separating us from the Tommy kids." Tommy looked at me in shock. This was information neither of us had known over the subsequent 15 years. "You attempted to extort money from me no fewer than 13 times. Each time I documented your communications, recorded your phone calls, and preserved your emails. The most recent attempt was 5 years ago when you, Frank, threatened to tell Della and Tommy that I had paid you to disappear from their lives. A vicious lie that would have devastated them." Frank's face had drained of all color. Elaine was frantically shaking her head, as if denying the words could make them untrue. Gordon paused, then pressed a button on a remote control. A screen descended from the ceiling, and the video began to play. There was Frank, visibly intoxicated, sitting in what appeared to be a cheap motel room. "Listen, Walter," Video Frank slurred, "the kids do not need to know the arrangement. We had. 50 grand is nothing to you, just a little brother, helping out his family, right? But if you do not come through this time, maybe Della needs to hear how her precious uncle really got custody." The video cut to another clip This one showing Elaine in a different location, her hair styled differently, clearly from another time. "Walter, be reasonable," she said smoothly. "We could have fought you for custody if we wanted to. We could tell Della you kidnapped her, that we have been searching for years. Is that what you want her to think? Just wire the money like before, and this all goes away." Gordon stopped the video. The silence in the room. Absolute. Except for Tommy's ragged breathing. As you can see, Gordon continued reading Walter's letter. "I have kept meticulous records of your attempts at extortion. What you may not know is that your criminal activities extend beyond harassing me. My investigators have documented your involvement in multiple confidant schemes across several states. Your defrauding of elderly victims, and your attempts to extort other successful business people, using similar tactics to those you employed with me." Gordon looked up from the letter. "I should note that all of this evidence, including financial records, tracking the money Walter did provide in the early years out of concern for the children's welfare, has been provided to the FBI as of this morning." Elaine began to sob loudly. "This is not true. It was all Frank's idea. I never wanted to leave the children." Frank stood up abruptly, his chair tipping backward. "You cannot prove any of this. It will be your word against ours." "Actually," Gordon said calmly, "the evidence is quite comprehensive. Walter was nothing if not thorough." He returned to the letter to Della and Tommy. "I apologize for keeping this from you. I feared the knowledge would only cause you more pain, and there seemed no benefit in sharing it. You had already suffered enough betrayal. Know that every penny they attempted to extort was documented and will now be donated to organizations supporting abandoned children, turning their greed into something positive." Tommy had tears streaming down his face. I reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. "As for the remainder of my estate," Gordon continued reading, including all shares in Campbell Tech Solutions, all real estate holdings, investment portfolios, and personal property, not otherwise specifically bequeathed, I leave equally to my beloved children, Stella Maurice Campbell and Thomas Maurice Campbell, with the full confidence that they will honor the values we have shared and continue the legacy we have built together." Gordon folded the letter and looked up. "That concludes the reading of the will." At that moment, the conference room door opened and two men in dark suits entered, displaying FBI badges. Frank and Elaine Morris, one agent said, "We need you to come with us. We have some questions regarding multiple fraud investigations across state lines." Frank lunged toward me, his face contorted with rage. "This is your fault. You turned him against us. We are your parents." The FBI agents quickly intervened, restraining Frank, as Elaine collapsed into dramatic sobs. "My babies, please," she wailed. "Do not let them take your mother away." As they were escorted from the room, Frank still hurling accusations, and Elaine still pleading. I felt a strange emptiness where I had expected satisfaction. Their true colors had been exposed just as the thumbnail had promised, but the victory felt hollow. Gordon waited until they were gone before speaking again. "I apologize for the drama, but Walter insisted this happened exactly as it has. He wanted them to face consequences for their actions, not just toward him, but toward all their victims." "Did he really pay them?" Tommy asked, his voice small. In the beginning, Gordon nodded. Once, shortly after he gained custody of Della, they threatened to contest the arrangement to drag you both through court proceedings, to make false accusations. Walter paid them to stay away, to give you both peace. He considered it the best investment he ever made. After the FBI agents led our parents away, Tommy and I remained in the conference room, trying to process everything we had just learned. The others had tactfully departed, leaving only Gordon to sit quietly with us in the aftermath. "I do not understand," Tommy said finally. "Why would they come back now? Did they really think Walter would leave them money after everything they did?" "People see what they want to see," I said, staring at the empty chairs where Frank and Elaine had sat moments before. "They have spent their lives believing they deserve things they have not earned." Gordon cleared his throat gently. "Walter anticipated you might have questions after today's revelations. He left each of you a private letter as well. He handed us each an envelope with our names written in Walter's firm handwriting. Mine contained several pages. The paper, high-quality stationery. Walter had always preferred Della. It began, 'If you are reading this, I am gone. and you have just witnessed the confrontation with Frank and Elaine that I arranged. I hope you can forgive me for keeping their periodic appearances from you. I made the decision to shield you from their continued attempts to profit from your pain. I want you to know that I was aware of my diagnosis 5 years ago, much earlier than I shared with you and Tommy. When I received the news, my first thought was not of my own mortality, but of what would happen to both of you when I was gone. I knew Frank and Elaine would eventually resurface, drawn by the prospect of inheritance. You may wonder why I orchestrated this public exposure rather than simply excluding them from my will. I did so because I wanted you to see them clearly, to understand beyond any doubt that their abandonment was never your fault. You deserved parents who would move heaven and earth to keep you safe. Instead, you got Frank and Elaine, who saw their own children as commodities to be traded. I have watched you grow from a frightened, wounded 13-year-old into a brilliant, compassionate woman who amazes me daily. The strength you have shown, the resilience, the determination to create good from the ashes of betrayal. These are qualities that cannot be taught. They come from within you. My greatest regret is that I will not be there to see all you will accomplish, but I leave this world confident in the knowledge that you and Tommy will continue to thrive, to support each other, and perhaps to help other children who, like yourselves, need someone to believe in them. With all my love and endless pride, Walter. I folded the letter carefully, tears blurring my vision across the table. Tommy was similarly affected by his own letter, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. He knew, Tommy said softly. He knew all along they would come back for money. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. In the weeks that followed, we learned more about Frank and Elaine's activities during their 15-year absence. The FBI investigation revealed a pattern of small-time confidant schemes across multiple states. They had preyed particularly on elderly victims posing as charity workers, home repair contractors, and even distant relatives. They had been careful to keep each scam small enough to avoid federal attention, moving frequently to stay ahead of local authorities. The court case moved swiftly, given the overwhelming evidence Walter had compiled. Both Frank and Elaine accepted plea deals rather than face trial. Frank received 7 years in federal prison, Elaine 5, with orders for restitution they would never be able to pay. I debated visiting them in prison, but ultimately decided against it. What would be the point? I asked Tommy during one of our regular Sunday dinners, now held at my downtown apartment. They are not suddenly going to become the parents we needed. I agree, Tommy said, pushing food around his plate. But does it make us terrible people that we are not even trying to maintain a relationship with them? No, I said firmly. We lost our parents 15 years ago. The people in those prison cells are strangers who happen to share our DNA. Walter was our real parent in every way that matters. The process of settling Walter's estate occupied much of my time in those first months. The responsible of running Campbell Tech's small business division while helping the new CEO transition into Walter's role was overwhelming at times. Tommy had returned to New York to continue his work at the gallery, though we spoke daily, and he flew back to Chicago at least twice a month. 3 months after the whistle reading, I made a decision that would have made Walter proud. I established the Walter Campbell Foundation for Family Reunification, using a significant portion of my inheritance. The foundation's mission was to help siblings separated by the foster care system reconnect and, when possible, reunite. I thought often of how different my life might have been if Tommy and I had remained separated, if Walter had not fought so hard to bring us back together. My healing journey was not linear. There were days when the anger threatened to consume me, when I imagined confronting Frank and Dylan in their prison cells, demanding answers they likely could not provide. Dr. Bennett, who had helped me through my teenage years, once again became an important part of my support system, helping me navigate the complex emotions stirred up by their reappearance and subsequent imprisonment. Forgiveness is not about absolving them, she reminded me during one particularly difficult session. It is about freeing yourself from the burden of hatred. 6 months after Walter's death, I met Michael at a charity gala for the foundation, a structural engineer with kind eyes and a patient demeanor. He listened attentively as I shared pieces of my story, never pushing for more than I was ready to give. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and genuine interest in each other's lives and passions. Tommy thrived in New York's art scene. his paintings now featured in respected galleries and private collections. He used his platform to advocate for arts education in underserved communities, establishing scholarships for talented foster youth interested in pursuing creative careers. A year into Frank and Elaine's sentences, I received an unexpected letter from the Women's Federal Prison in Kentucky. Unlike Walter's careful stationery, this was written on cheap lined paper in a shaky hand. I barely recognized as Elaine's Stella, she wrote. I do not expect forgiveness, nor do I deserve it. The things we did to you and Tommy to Walter to others were unforgivable. I write not to make excuses, but to tell you one truth. Among the many lies, I have always been proud that you were my daughter. Even when I failed completely at being your mother, I did not respond immediately, letting the words sit with me for weeks as I considered whether there was any value in maintaining even the most distant contact. Eventually, I decided to see her once before her release the following year. The visit was brief and awkward. Elaine had aged dramatically in prison, her carefully maintained appearance now weathered and gray. She asked about Tommy, about my work, listening with what seemed like genuine interest. She did not ask for money or favors, did not attempt to justify her actions. As I prepared to leave, she said simply, I do not expect to be part of your life, Della. I just wanted you to know that I recognize the extraordinary person you have become. Despite having us as parents, I did not become who I am. Despite you, I replied, finding a truth I had not fully articulated before. In some ways, it was because of you. Your abandonment led me to Walter, and he showed me what unconditional love looks like. I would not trade the person I am today, and that person was shaped by every experience, including being left behind. I did not visit Frank, who had made no attempt to contact either Tommy or me. Some bridges remain permanently burned, and I had made peace with that reality. 3 years after Walter's death, the foundation opened its first physical location, a welcoming space in downtown Chicago, where separated siblings could reunite in a supportive environment, with counselors available to help navigate the complex emotions such reunions often triggered. We named it Campbell House, in honor of the home Walter had created for Tommy and me. The most profound moment in my healing journey came unexpectedly during the open house celebration for Campbell House. A 12-year-old girl approached me, clutching a handmade thank you card. The foundation helped me find my little brother, she told me, her eyes bright with joy. We were separated for 3 years, but now his foster family brings him to visit me every month. They are even talking about adopting me too, so we can be together all the time. In that moment, I felt Walter's presence so strongly. It took my breath away. This was his legacy continued through us. Not the financial empire he had built, but the belief that family, whether born or chosen, was worth fighting for. Family is not defined by blood. I told a reporter who covered the foundation's work. It is defined by who shows up, who stays, who makes you feel safe and valued and loved. Walter taught us that, and it is the most valuable inheritance he left us. As I build my life now, balancing my role at Campbell Tech with the foundation's growing work, I carry Walter's lessons with me. I have learned that the deepest wounds can become wellsprings of compassion if we allow them to be. I have discovered that the best revenge against those who hurt us is not to cause them pain in return, but to create joy and purpose from what they tried to destroy. Have you ever had someone from your past reappear when they thought there was something to gain? How did you handle it? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might need to hear that family is about love and choice, not just DNA. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember that sometimes the greatest gifts come from our deepest pain.